I never imagined the boy I once held in my arms, the one who used to chase butterflies in our garden, would one day look at me as if I were nothing but a problem to be solved. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind of day that used to make me bake cookies and hum old songs. But that day, the air in my son's luxurious home was cold, distant, and filled with the sound of my own heartbeat. I had been living with Daniel and his wife, Clara, for nearly a year. They had invited me after my husband passed away, saying, "You'll never be alone, Mom. Our home is your home." Those words used to comfort me, but comfort, I learned, can fade like a dream when love turns into obligation. That morning I woke early to make breakfast. Old habits die hard. The smell of eggs and toast filled the kitchen when Clara walked in, her eyes rolling the moment she saw me. "Mrs. Turner," she said. Not Mom. Never Mom anymore. "You really don't have to cook. We have help for that." Her tone was polite, but her eyes screamed something else. "You're in my way." Before I could reply, Daniel walked in, dressed in his sharp suit, scrolling on his phone. He barely looked at me. "Good morning, dear," I said softly. He muttered, sitting down. As I poured him coffee, my hands trembled slightly. "You used to like extra sugar." He cut me off. "Mom, you don't need to fuss over me like I'm 5. We have things handled." I smiled weakly. "I just wanted to help." That's when it happened. He looked up, his eyes cold and tired. "Mom," he said, "you're becoming kind of a burden." The world stopped. The rain outside slowed to a whisper, as if even nature didn't want to intrude. A burden. The word echoed in my chest like thunder. I stared at him, my lips trembling. I'm sorry, Daniel. I didn't mean to." He sighed. "I just mean, you don't have to do so much. Maybe you should think about staying somewhere quieter. A place where you can relax." A place. He meant a home for the elderly. Clara smiled faintly, sipping her coffee. "That might be nice for you, Mrs. Turner. You'd have company. People your age." Their words sliced through me. People my age. Was I already a stranger in my own son's life? I excused myself before my tears betrayed me. In my small room upstairs, I opened the box that held my husband's photo. "You promised me we'd never be lonely, George," I whispered. But promises fade when love changes shape. That night, I folded my clothes neatly. One suitcase, one pair of shoes, a few old photographs. Everything that still felt like me. Before sunrise, I left a note on the kitchen table. "Daniel, thank you for everything. I don't want to be a burden. Take care of yourself and Clara." "Mom." I stepped out into the rain, the sky weeping with me. My bones ached, but my soul felt strangely light. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't living in someone's shadow. I was walking toward the unknown. Maybe loneliness, maybe peace, but I was walking with dignity. The cold air bit at my cheeks as I walked down the empty street. My old suitcase rattled against the pavement, its wheels worn from years of travel with my late husband. Each step felt heavier than the one before, but my heart had already gone numb. Cars passed by, people hurried to work. No one noticed the old woman walking away from her only home. The rain turned to mist, and the world looked blurred, like a half-forgotten memory. At the corner, I stopped near a small bus stop. A young man was sitting there, headphones in his ears, lost in his world. I lowered myself onto the bench beside him, breathing out slowly. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked after a moment, taking out one earbud. I smiled faintly. "Just tired, dear. But I suppose that's what age does. It makes you carry things you can't put down." He nodded awkwardly and looked away, unsure how to respond. I didn't blame him. The young never know what to say to the broken hearts of the old. The bus came soon after. I didn't even know where it was going, but I stepped inside anyway. The driver looked at me through the mirror and asked, "Where to, ma'am?" I paused. Then I said softly, "As far as this ticket can take me." He raised an eyebrow but didn't ask more. The bus roared to life and the city slowly disappeared behind me. The tall buildings, the noise, the memories. Hours passed. I watched the raindrops race across the window like they were trying to escape too. My reflection stared back at me. A wrinkled face, tired eyes. But something different this time. Peace. When we finally stopped in a small countryside town, I decided to get off. It was quiet, surrounded by trees that looked older than pain itself. I dragged my suitcase down the narrow lane and saw a small inn with a sign that read, "Welcome Travelers." Inside, a kind woman greeted me. "Do you need a room, dear?" "Yes," I said softly. "For a few days. Or maybe longer." She handed me a key and smiled warmly. "You look like you've walked a long road." I smiled back. "Longer than you can imagine." The room was small but cozy. A single bed, a window overlooking the hills, and the faint scent of old wood and comfort. I sat on the bed and opened my suitcase. My husband's photograph stared back at me. "I left George," I whispered. "I left our boy." Tears finally came, quiet, trembling tears that carried years of love, disappointment, and longing. I cried until I couldn't anymore, and when I looked out the window, the clouds had started to clear. The next morning I went for a walk through the town. There was a small bakery that smelled of cinnamon and kindness. The baker, an old man with bright eyes, offered me a free cup of tea. "First cup's always on the house," he said cheerfully. We talked for a while, about life, about losing people, about growing old in a world that moves too fast. It felt strange to be seen again, not as a burden, but as a person. That night lying in bed, I realized something. Maybe walking away wasn't the end of my story. Maybe it was the beginning of finding myself again. The woman I used to be before life turned into sacrifice. Still, a quiet ache lived in my heart. No matter how far I went, I couldn't stop hearing Daniel's voice. "You're a burden." It haunted me like a shadow. But this time I decided not to run from it. I would face it, live with it, and maybe, someday, forgive it. The next few days in the little town passed slowly, like pages turning in a gentle wind. I'd wake up to the sound of birds outside the inn window, a sound I hadn't heard in Daniel's house. There, everything was polished and perfect, but empty. Here everything was imperfect, but it breathed. Every morning I went to the same bakery. It had become my small ritual. 1 cup of tea, 1 warm pastry, and a quiet corner by the window. The baker, whose name I learned was Henry, always greeted me with the same cheerful line. "Ah, my favorite morning guest. The usual?" I'd smile and nod. "You always remember." He'd wink. Hard to forget a face that carries so many stories. Sometimes he'd sit across from me when the shop wasn't too busy. We'd talk about his late wife, about my garden back home, about how time steals more than just youth. It steals moments we never thought would end. There was something healing about his presence. He never asked why I looked sad or where I came from. He simply offered company. Gentle, unspoken kindness. One afternoon, as I was about to leave, Henry handed me a small paper bag. "For you," he said. "No charge." I opened it and saw 2 cookies shaped like hearts. "They're for sharing," he added softly. "But you can keep both if you need them more." I laughed, a real honest laugh I hadn't felt in months. "You're kind, Henry. Too kind." He shrugged. "Kindness is free, pain isn't. So I try to give the free stuff while I can." That night, back at the inn, I sat by the window again, holding the cookies and looking out at the stars. It felt strange, to be alone but not lonely. The ache was still there, yes, but it didn't hurt as sharply. Maybe hearts don't really break. They just change shape to fit the pain. Days turned into weeks. I started helping Henry around the bakery, folding boxes, wiping tables, even kneading dough when my hands didn't ache too much. He said I made the best cinnamon rolls. I told him I used to bake them for my son when he was little. "He'd run around the kitchen," I said, smiling faintly, "covered in flour, calling them love rolls." Henry chuckled. "Maybe you should call them that again. Sounds warmer than cinnamon." We laughed, and for a moment it felt like family again. The kind that doesn't hurt. But one morning, as I was dusting flour off my apron, I noticed something on Henry's wall. A photograph of him and his daughter. They looked happy, arms wrapped around each other, in front of the same bakery. "She's beautiful," I said. His face darkened slightly. "She used to visit, but it's been years. She lives far away now. Busy life, I suppose." I nodded. "Children grow, sometimes faster than love can catch up." He looked at me, eyes soft with understanding. "You sound like someone who knows." I smiled sadly. "I do." That evening, after closing, we sat outside the bakery watching the sunset. The sky burned orange and pink, and the smell of bread still hung in the air. "You ever think," I asked, "that maybe we raised them to be too strong? So strong they forgot we could still break?" Henry sighed deeply. "Maybe. Or maybe we just loved them so much, we forgot to teach them how to love back." We sat in silence after that, letting the truth settle between us. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. Someone saw me. Not as a burden, not as a responsibility, but as a soul, still learning how to live. It had been nearly 2 months since I left Daniel's house. 2 months of quiet mornings, the smell of bread, and the comfort of small-town kindness. My laughter had started to sound like my own again. But peace, I've learned, is a fragile guest. It never stays too long before life decides to test your strength again. That morning Henry was running late, so I opened the bakery alone. The bell above the door chimed gently as I arranged the loaves on the shelf. Then the postman walked in, holding a few letters. "Mornin', Mrs. Turner," he greeted warmly. "Got something for you today. Looks official." I frowned slightly. "For me?" He nodded and handed me an envelope. My heart stopped when I saw the handwriting. It was Daniel's. For a moment the world blurred. I stared at the paper as if it might vanish if I blinked too hard. My hands trembled as I took it. "Everything all right, ma'am?" the postman asked. I forced a smile. Yes, thank you." When he left, I just stood there, clutching the letter to my chest. My stomach turned with fear and hope all tangled together. For hours, I couldn't open it. I made tea, swept the floor twice, and even helped an old woman choose pastries she didn't need. Anything to avoid what that letter might say. Finally, when the sun began to set, I sat down at the little table by the window. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. "Mom, I don't know where you went. Clara told me you left without saying goodbye." I was angry at first. At you, at myself, at everything. I thought you'd be better off somewhere else, but lately, I've realized something. The house feels empty without you. Clara barely speaks to me anymore, and the silence keeps me awake. I think I made a terrible mistake. If you're safe, please write back. I miss you. Daniel. By the time I reached the end, the ink had blurred under my tears. I pressed the paper to my heart and sobbed. The kind of cry that comes from every place you've ever been hurt. He missed me. He realized. But could love come back after being broken like that? That evening, Henry found me sitting in the dark bakery. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said softly. I handed him the letter. He read it carefully, then looked at me with eyes full of quiet understanding. "Well," he said finally, "what will you do?" I didn't answer right away. My voice came out small. "I don't know. My heart says go. My fear says stay." Henry nodded. "You don't owe him forgiveness, you know. But you do owe yourself peace. Whichever road gives you that, take it." That night, I couldn't sleep. The letter lay beside me like a ghost of everything I'd lost. I thought of Daniel as a child. His laugh, his warm hugs, the way he'd say, "Mom, don't ever leave me." I realized something. I had left, yes, but not out of anger. I left because I wanted him to see me, to feel what silence truly meant. Maybe now. He finally did. I didn't write back immediately. I needed time. But for the first time since I walked away, I allowed myself to believe that maybe love, even broken love, could find its way home again. For days, the letter sat on my bedside table like an unanswered prayer. Every time I looked at it, my heart clenched. Not from anger anymore, but from fear. What if Daniel hadn't really changed? What if I went back only to hear those words again? "You're a burden." Henry noticed the sadness behind my smile. One morning, while we were rolling dough together, he spoke softly. "Still thinking about that letter, aren't you?" I nodded. "It's strange. I prayed for years that my son would need me again, and now that he does, I'm scared to believe it." He set down the rolling pin and looked at me. "Sometimes love hurts because it's trying to grow. Maybe this is his way of learning." That night, I read the letter again under the warm glow of the bedside lamp. The ink had faded slightly where my tears had fallen. He missed me. He realized he was wrong. Maybe that was enough to open the door. Not fully, but a little. So, I decided to write back. My hands shook as I held the pen. "My dear Daniel, I received your letter. I've been safe. I'm glad to hear from you, though my heart still aches when I think of how we parted. I don't hate you, my son. I never could. I only hope that one day you'd see me not as a burden, but as the mother who gave you everything she had. Love, Mom." I didn't ask for him to come. I didn't promise I'd return. I simply gave him honesty. The only thing left that was mine. The next day, I mailed the letter. My hands trembled as I dropped it into the red box. It was like releasing a piece of my soul into the wind. Henry watched me from across the street. "Whatever happens now," he said, "you've already won. You face the past without running." Weeks passed. Life went on as usual. The bakery, the laughter, the gentle rhythm of the small town. But somewhere deep inside, I waited. Then one rainy afternoon, the postman came again. "You've got another letter, Mrs. Turner." This time, I didn't hesitate. I tore it open right there in the bakery. "Mom, thank you for writing back. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. Clara has left. She said I changed, that I wasn't the same man. Maybe she's right. Losing you showed me what real loss feels like. I don't know if you can ever come home, but if you do, I'll be waiting." The words blurred as my eyes filled with tears. He was waiting. Henry came over quietly. "You should go," he said softly. I looked at him. "What if it hurts again?" He smiled gently. "Then you'll survive it again. But if you don't go, You'll never know if love was trying to come home to you. That night, I packed my suitcase once more, the same one I'd carried when I walked away. But this time, it didn't feel heavy with pain. It felt full of hope. Before I left, Henry placed a warm loaf of bread in my hands. "For the road," he said with a smile. "And if you ever need a place to come back to, this bakery will always have a chair waiting for you." I hugged him, tears streaming down my cheeks. "Thank you, Henry. You gave me more kindness than I ever expected to find again." As the morning sun rose, I boarded the first bus heading toward the city. The same road that had once taken me away was now leading me home. My heart pounded with every mile. I didn't know what awaited me, forgiveness, pain, or silence. But I knew I had to face it. Because sometimes, love isn't about never leaving. It's about being brave enough to come back. The bus ride felt longer than it really was. Every mile carried memories, lullabies, birthdays, laughter, and the sound of that one cruel word, burden. When I finally reached the city, everything looked familiar yet distant, like a dream I'd half forgotten. I took a deep breath and started walking toward Daniel's house, the same grand home I had left in tears months ago. My hands trembled as I reached the gate. For a long moment, I just stood there, clutching my suitcase, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat. The house looked quiet. The flowers I'd once planted had withered. The windows were shut tight, the curtains drawn. It didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a place waiting for forgiveness. I lifted my hand and knocked. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, hesitant, almost scared. The door creaked open, and there he was, my son. Daniel looked older. His eyes were tired, his face unshaven, his clothes wrinkled. But the moment he saw me, his lips parted and his eyes filled with tears. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. For a second, I couldn't speak. I wanted to scold him, to hug him, to run away, all at once. But when his tears fell, all my anger melted like snow in sunlight. "I didn't think you'd come," he said, his voice trembling. "I almost didn't," I replied softly. But then I realized, maybe we both needed this. He stepped aside. "Please, come in." Inside, the house felt cold. The laughter, the warmth, all gone. The same dining room where he once called me a burden now stood silent, almost guilty. He led me to the living room and handed me a cup of tea. His hands shook as much as mine. "Clara left," he said quietly. "She said I'd changed. Maybe I had. After you left, I started seeing things differently. The house felt empty. And I realized maybe it wasn't the house that was empty. It was me." I looked at him, my heart softening. We all say things we can't take back, Daniel. But pain has a way of teaching us what love truly means. He nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. "I thought I was doing you a favor, giving you space, freedom. But what I really did was push away the only person who ever stood by me." I reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers curled around mine, hesitant at first, then tight, like a child afraid to let go again. "Mom," he whispered, voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For what I said. For forgetting how much you gave up for me." I smiled faintly through my tears. "I forgave you long before you asked, Daniel. I just needed you to remember who I was." He broke down completely then, his head resting against my lap, just like he used to when he was a boy. My trembling hand stroked his hair. The years between us dissolved in that moment. The distance, the silence, the hurt. I missed you every single day, he said between sobs. I know, I whispered. And I missed you too. But maybe we both needed the distance to see what love looks like when it's almost lost. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red, but there was something new in them. Humility, understanding, love reborn through pain. Stay, he said softly. Stay with me, Mom. I'll do better this time. I smiled through my tears. We'll see, dear. Maybe not forever. But for now, let's start with today. He nodded, squeezing my hand. And for the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel cold anymore. It felt alive again. Not perfect, not healed, but human. It's been a few months since I came back. The house feels different now. Not because the furniture changed, but because the silence has softened. It no longer feels like a punishment. It feels like peace. Daniel and I have fallen into a quiet rhythm. He still goes to work, but every morning before he leaves, he kisses my forehead. Something he hadn't done since he was a child. Sometimes I see guilt flicker in his eyes when he looks at me. I don't remind him of the past anymore. The past has already done its work. It broke us, and then it built something new. I spend my days tending to the little garden outside, the one where my flowers had once died. Now new buds are blooming, small but strong. Maybe love grows the same way, fragile at first, but patient enough to return. One evening, Daniel came home early. He stood by the doorway, watching me water the roses. Need help? He asked. I smiled. Always. We watered the plants together. He didn't talk much, but sometimes love doesn't need words. It just needs presence. Later that night, we sat by the fireplace. I was knitting, and Daniel was scrolling through old photos on his phone. Suddenly he said, Mom, do you ever regret leaving? I looked at him quietly. No, I said after a moment. If I hadn't left, you might never have found your way back. He nodded, eyes glistening. I wish I could take back what I said. I smiled softly. But then, I wouldn't have this version of you. The one who understands pain. The one who listens. He put his phone down and took my hand. You've always been stronger than me, Mom. I shook my head gently. No, dear. I just learned that sometimes strength isn't in holding on. It's in walking away when love forgets your worth. He didn't speak after that, but his hand never left mine. The warmth between our palms said everything. Words couldn't. A few weeks later, I decided to visit Henry one last time. I told Daniel I'd be gone for a day. He insisted on driving me. When we reached the small town, the sight of the bakery brought tears to my eyes. The little bell above the door still chimed the same soft note. Henry's face lit up when he saw me. Well, if it isn't my favorite helper. He laughed, wiping his hands on his apron. I hugged him tightly. I came to say thank you, I said softly. You helped me remember that life still had warmth left in it. He smiled kindly. You gave it back to yourself, dear. I just offered the tea. We sat for hours, talking, laughing, remembering. Before I left, Henry placed a small paper bag in my hands. 2 cookies, shaped like hearts. Some things, he said with a wink, shouldn't change. I smiled through tears. Some people shouldn't either. As Daniel and I drove home, I looked out the window at the rolling hills and the road that had once carried me away from everything I loved. Now, it was carrying me home. Not because I had nowhere else to go, but because my heart had healed enough to return. That night, I sat by the window, holding one of Henry's heart-shaped cookies and watching the stars. I thought of my husband, of the life we built, of the son who broke my heart and mended it with the same hands. Grandma's voice softens to a whisper. Love doesn't disappear when it hurts. It changes, it bends, it breaks, and if we're lucky, it finds its way home. Just like I did. She pauses for a moment, her eyes wet but smiling. So, if anyone listening has ever felt unwanted or forgotten, remember, you are not a burden. You are the reason someone learns what love truly means. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional grandma stories. And tell me in the comments, have you ever forgiven someone who hurt you and found peace because of it? Your words might heal a stranger's heart tonight.